Hey everybody, Jason here. Today I'd like to tell you a bit about the off-grid tiny cabin that I'm building. So I have a video that summarizes all the work that I did last year while building the cabin. I'll put a link in the description in case you're new to the channel. You can go and you can check that out, and then you'll have all the information in order. I also have videos that show every step that I've done along the way, so if you're interested in any of those stages, you can just visit my channel or my website and watch those independent videos. In this video, I'm going to be focusing on what I've done on the tiny cabin this year. In the last video showing what I've done so far, I ended the year paneling the exterior walls. I chose to use Eastern Yellow Cedar tongue and groove paneling for the exterior because of cedar's natural rot resistant and bug repelling properties. Plus the wood's available from an Amish wood mill just around the corner, so it's easy to get to. With the exterior walls paneled, I had to wait till spring to get it outside because I didn't have enough headroom in the shop. So as soon as the warmer weather arrived, I moved the cabin and started to panel the roof. Once again, I opted for Eastern Yellow tongue and groove boards. I was planning on keeping the ceiling open and thought the cedar would look good as a ceiling down the road. When I was finished with the paneling, I added flat stock black steel sheeting that I custom ordered from a local shop. The shop specializes in steel roofing and bend and form their own steel, so it was also easy to get. So while I was putting the steel up on the roof, I also added some drip edges along the two side walls. Now, I didn't do it on the arch because truthfully I wasn't really sure how I would bend the steel to fit in place, and that was a mistake. I should have definitely capped off the ends first, because then later on I went to put the drip edge on the ends, and yeah, it was twice as difficult. So I did manage to get it in, but in hindsight, I should have done all the drip edge on all four sides. Regardless, at this stage, the tiny cabin was starting to really take shape. The next stage was to light sand the walls to remove any dirt and grime before painting on some penetrating oil wood finish. I chose penetrating oil because I wanted to use a finish that was easy to apply and preserve the natural look of the wood. I think the color of the wood really stands out now that it's finished. One thing that I'll say is that the penetrating oil was very messy. It was like painting with cooking oil and impossible to not get it all over my hands, so I had no choice but to wear gloves while working. I decided to use Western Red Cedar for the corner trim and cut it out of clear board so that there wouldn't be any knots and I'd get a straight grain. I wanted the cabin to have an overall rustic look to it, but that didn't mean that I wasn't willing to put in a little effort to make it look half decent as well. Like the rest of the build, I used construction adhesive and nails to hold the trim in place. One thing with building a tiny cabin or camper or whatever you'd call this is that I'm always aware that if it's on the road, it's going to be driving at relatively high speeds and the wind's going to pick up. So everything that's attached to the outside of it needs to be very secure so that, it doesn't go blowing off and cause an accident. So with the trim done, the next thing was to install the windows, and it took actually a lot of thought trying to figure out what type of windows I wanted to put in, for the same reason as not wanting anything to blow off. There's the risk of driving and the window breaking, and I didn't want to leave glass on the road. So for a long time, I was considering using Wiley windows. In the end, I decided to just go to a local Amish window maker. So Andy made the windows. I gave him the dimensions that I wanted, and they came back close to the dimensions that I ordered, and I was able to trim them down so that they would fit. I still have a bit of monkeying around to do in the future, but for the cost of them, it was fine. It's worth it. So, and I think they turned out really good as well. So with the windows, they arrived unfinished. So the first step was to tape off the glass and then finish them with some penetrating oil. Once the windows were dried, they were installed and I cut more Western red cedar for the trim around them. The windows are single pane glass and they're fully removable. So I think that I'll likely cut squares of plywood to fit in the openings to cover the glass when the off-grid cabin is left vacant or whenever I go to move it and drive it down the road. So with the windows and the trim in place, the next step was to build the exterior door. Even though I'd never built anything like it before, I decided to build a solid wood, 6-piece, flat panel Dutch door. I used Western red cedar and carefully cut the pieces, then used Thixo epoxy to glue it together. I used pipe clamps to hold it together until the epoxy cured. About 12 hours. From there, I fit the hinges to both the top and the bottom sections, and then installed the parts to the door frame. With the door attached to the door frame, I continued to add door hardware, including a latch that would keep the top half connected to the bottom half of the Dutch door. Then I drilled the hole with a special jig, and the door handle was added. For the door handle, I chose one that would give it a classic carriage style look to it. Once that was done, the door was installed into the off-grid cabin, and I added trim around the door to finish the exterior. So as many of you know, I've been building this tiny cabin without any set of design plans. I've just done a lot of measuring and a lot of calculating, and from time to time some just rough sketches to keep my ideas clear. Just basically a lot of imagination. One thing with the process that I've really had to do is look, 3 or 4 or 5 steps down the road so that I could prepare for it. And one of the things that way back I thought about was whether or not I would have any electricity or power in here. And I thought that for a tiny off-grid cabin, it might be nice to have even just a minimal amount from a solar panel. And so back when I framed out the walls, I drilled holes through the framing so that I could run the electrical wire. So with the door on, the next step was to start working on the inside of the cabin, and that would be the wiring was next. I chose to add one electrical outlet on each side of the off-grid cabin. I think for its size, this will be more than enough, and if I had a solar panel down the road, I'll be able to charge camera batteries or run other small appliances, maybe even plug in my laptop and do some editing. With the wiring in place, I insulated the walls with the rigid foam board and then used cans of spray foam to fill any gaps. So insulating the walls, the rigid foam has to be the messiest, dirtiest part of the process, I would say. It's just that foam, as you cut it, it creates foam dust, and really it goes everywhere. With the walls insulated, I used poly sheeting as a vapor barrier. And so then that's where we are. So the walls are insulated, the vapor barrier is up. The next step will be to panel the interior walls and then begin to fit it out with appropriate cabinetry and sleeping arrangements. So if you're new to the channel, please subscribe. And if you like this video, hit that like button, leave a comment, and thanks for watching.